Hello my friends, HM here. I make videos about topics that are important for whether our future will be better or worse. In this video I'm going to talk about master plans. About Ukraine's master plan, which is quickly done because it's quite clear. And then for the rest of my video I'm going to talk in more length about Russia's master plan, which is not as clear, but nevertheless we can see what it is. And I'm going to talk about that master plan. What is their objective? Why are they so hell-bent on following that objective? And finally, why it's doomed for a lot of good reasons. It's not just my own opinions, it's something I backed up with a lot of data and stuff I found that I'll show you. But let's get to it. Okay, first we have to go to the PowerPoint here and then we are set. So Ukraine's objective is crystal clear. It's to expel Russian occupiers from the Ukraine territory, dead or alive. And the great thing about having a clear objective is that then everybody understands what they're going to do and everybody on the same page. That's the number one thing in order to be successful with any plan, that is to clearly describe what is the objective. So Ukraine already there has an advantage over Russia that doesn't as clearly specify what their objective is and why they're doing it. And also why Ukraine doing it, it's because they want to live in freedom and democracy. They don't want to live under Putin's rule where they are just puppets of his regime and basically for Putin to reap all the profit of the Ukrainian economy so he can get even richer and also Putin's friends can get more wealthy. Of course, they don't want that. Nobody wants that. But more specifically, Ukraine's objective is to reestablish Ukrainian sovereignty as authorized by the 1991 Ukrainian independence referendum. That referendum resulted in all Ukrainian administrative oblasts voting in favor of independence. In fact, the national average of voting either for or against was that 90% voted yes, we want independence for Ukraine at that time. The lowest support here was found in Crimea, where 55.19% supported Ukrainian independence. And we have the full table here with all the results from the different parts of Ukraine with the percentages that voted. Down here we have the national average, 90%. That's a lot. And 76% of all those who were eligible for voting, they voted. So it's a very strong mandate from the Ukrainian population that they wanted independence. And similar independence votes were held in other Soviet Union republics that also became independent from that time on. Okay, but let's move on to Russia's master plan because this is really what the video is about. There are two reasons that the objective for Russia's master plan is less clear. The first is that Russia officially stated objective has changed over time. And the other reason why it's unclear is that Russia appears to have an unannounced objective that is far more ambitious about conquering land and people, not only in Ukraine, but also in Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and possibly all remaining former members of the Soviet Republic. Why I say that? Because if you are listening to propaganda people in Russian television, they all say that they should really reestablish the Soviet Union. And you also see when Russian troops are moving around in Ukraine, they are showing the old flag from the Soviet Union, the red flag there with seal and hammer on it. So yeah, they definitely have this idea that they want expansion and rebuild the old empire of the Soviet Union. Regarding Russia's official objective, first it was that they said they would denazify Ukraine, despite in Ukraine there are only fringe elements of wannabe Nazis. Just like any other country have. There are always some losers in the big cities where unhealthy people, often white, who have Nazi tattoos and so forth and who think that's a great idea. They have no idea what Nazism is and they're just losers. But of course, there are that kind of people in all countries, including Russia. And the other thing that should be mentioned is that the Ukraine president, Zelensky, he's actually Jewish. So yeah, that just makes it completely ridiculous. But Russians are full of BS and they have been doing more and more of it since they invaded Ukraine. It's just a hilarious country, to say the least. Okay, and lately Russia's officially stated objective has been the annexation of Ukraine, Crimea, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhzhia Oblasts. I have a little map here to show what I'm talking about. Here we have Crimea, then we have Kherson Oblast, Zaporizhzhia, and I'm pronouncing it completely wrong, but you know what I mean, and Donetsk and Luhansk. The funny part of that also is that they have made that into law that this is now Russian unilaterally. Nobody recognizes, of course, internationally. And if you look on this other map here, it shows how much territory Russia is currently occupying in Ukraine. Apart from Crimea, they don't have full control over any of those 4 oblasts that they say that's now Russian. So another hilariously action there from the Russians. But anyway, a little bit of history. Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014 and took Crimea, and I believe they also took some parts here of Donbass. But then again, we know Russia restarted the war here in February 2022, and the rest is history. Yeah, what else can I say? Well, I have this map here of Russian immigrants living in Ukraine. And you can see Crimea, there are actually 58% Russian immigrants down there. And then there are Tatars, that was the original people living there. They were deported by Stalin to Siberia, most of them. And then he also forcibly moved ethnic Russians into this area to kind of destroy their culture and annex this peninsula. But there is some history around it, and it became part of Ukraine also officially, even under the Soviet Union. It was part of the Ukraine administration at that time, and now they voted for independence, and they had a majority voting for independence. So it's clearly Ukraine. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, there are Russian immigrants living there, of course. In many countries where you have borders to another country, in the border regions, there will be immigrants. You can see it here that the border regions to Russia has a higher percentage of Russian immigrants living there. But on the other side of that border are Ukraine immigrants who live in Russia. Should Ukraine then say that now, okay, we need to annex that part of Russia because there are Ukrainians who live there? Completely foolish, but anyway, that's enough about the unclear objectives, so let's move on. Why do Russia want to expand? The short answer here is they want to expand in order to stay relevant globally. So why would they attack other countries? The Russian leadership here, they know that they have become less relevant globally for each year passing, with population decline and shrinking GDP relative to other countries. I have a little data to back this up. Here we have a list of all the countries in the world and their GDP, gross domestic product. How big are they in terms of economics? Well, United States is on top with 23,000 billion US dollar. And then we have China number 2 here with 17,000 US dollars. And then we have the euro area not far behind China, but still the entire euro area has less economic activity now than all of China. China has really come up. And down here on place number 12, we find Russia. It used to be that Russia was just behind the United States. Now they are down here on number 12 list, so they keep falling down this list here in terms of economics. And also, as we can see here, Russia's population is falling. It has been falling, and then they conquered Crimea and included Crimea's population into this population statistic, so they pumped it up. But now it's back to declining population here. So Putin's master plan here is to fix this decline of Russian power. That is simply to use its mighty military, and I have that in brackets, because now we know that it's not that mighty. To use that military power to conquer land and people from its neighboring countries. But it's not just about a master plan for making Russia great. I also think Putin personally has an ambition about being remembered as a great leader who expanded the Russian Empire. That's definitely also playing into it. But the thing is, Putin is not alone in his ambition to expand Russia. He's actually largely supported by the Russian establishment and also the Russian people. You wouldn't think that, but I found some credible opinion polls that has been made that shows that 71% support the current war in Ukraine and 91% supported the invasion of Crimea in Ukraine. So Putin is not alone. I don't have anything against countries or Russia having ambitions about being a powerful nation. Of course, everybody who can would like to get higher up on this list. That's fine. But my objection here is that in a civilized world, the only legitimate way for a nation to become powerful is through internal growth of people and economy and not through military annexation of other countries. We should have left that idea from the Middle Ages many decades ago, but apparently there are still some people in our world, in our time, who thinks that this beggar your neighbor policy and expand through stealing from others is a great idea. Russians apparently think that's a great idea, and we all need to work together to be sure that Russia will fail, and they will fail. But let's move on. First, we need to talk about implementation. How do Russia imagine that they can implement this plan of expanding the Russian Empire? Now we know Russia's objective, and we also know the motivation for expansion. So what is Russia's plan to implement this expansion objective? I found two great newspaper articles on the topic, and together they shed a lot of light on Russia's operational plan for achieving this objective. The first one here is from Forbes from 20 September 2022. And it's describing how Russia currently at that time, but also still is, it's not outdated. Russia is currently unable to declare a mass mobilization because they lack weapons and personnel to train fully mobilized army with millions of soldiers. And maybe I should make a few quotes from that article. Let me bring it in here, and I'll just read up a few lines from this, and then you can read it yourself. I'll provide a link below. Okay, in theory, mobilization could swell the Russian army's ranks by millions. In practice, those millions of new troops would lack instructors to train them, units to absorb them, commanders to lead them, non-commissioned officers to mentor them, and equipment to give them useful combat power. You can mobilize them, sure, but if you can't give them training and weapons, then they'll just be cannon fodder and they'll have absolutely no combat power on the battlefield. If they attack with knives, they will last like only a few seconds out there. They'll just be shot and bombed away. So of course you need weapons. There are many good quotes I could make, but I think these two here. In order to execute mobilization in case of war, you need to maintain massive excessive capacities in peacetime, tweeted Kamil Galiev, an independent expert on Russian politics. And the Soviet Union did. They had these excessive capacities. One reason why the Soviet army was so horrible excessive is that it maintained enormous excessive capacities just in case of mobilization. But the army sold off all that excess capacity during the years following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. They sold it to North Korea. They also sold a lot of weapons to Iran from these stocks of the Soviet Empire. There are no excessive schools, no training grounds to train new recruits. There are no excessive lodgings to quarter them, and there are no excessive officers to lead them, nor are there these enormous stocks of military equipment that is ready to use. So it's impossible for Russia currently to declare a full mobilization. And let's get this out of the way again. This one is from the 20th of September, that Forbes article I just read from. And then the day after, on 21st of September 2022, Russia declared a partial mobilization of 300,000 men, or about what Russia was able to equip and train with remaining stocks of weapons and personnel. That was absolutely the limit for what Russia could do. And really, they didn't have a whole lot of equipment for them. Medical gear, they didn't have that. They had received women's, bleeding stuff. They have, I don't know the English word for it, I'm Danish. When women have menstruation, they have something to suck up the blood. And they got that as the medical kit for these mobilized soldiers, just to show how non-well-equipped these people are they had to mobilize. And they certainly didn't have capacity to mobilize millions. Then they would just get a knife and they wouldn't even get a uniform because they don't have it. So that's one good reason why Russia hasn't mobilized. They simply don't have the weapons. And the other article here is from The Guardian on the 28th of March 2023, describing a dinner party at the Russian establishment where Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, one of Putin's friends, longtime friend, gives a speech where he says that Russia's plan to win the war is a multi-year plan where they scale up its military industry so they can equip and train a much bigger army. That is really their plan. And it's a good plan, you could say, in the sense that if you really want this, you want to expand, you definitely need to have a much bigger army, or they will not conquer Ukraine, and they will not conquer all the other territories that they're interested in conquering in order to reestablish the Soviet Union. So they need a much bigger army, and they understand in that inner circle that it will take years to accomplish. Okay, the rest of my presentation will be about Russia's real master plan and why it's doomed. But let's first restate this master plan, the real master plan, in one paragraph so it becomes crystal clear. To spend the next 5 years or so to 5x military production and expand the Russian army from 1 million men to 5 million men, and also to use that army to reestablish as much of the Soviet Union as the military successes will allow. So here we have this map of the old Soviet Union and all the countries it includes, and that's really the master plan, to get that stuff up and running again. And everything I've learned about Russia last year and also this year makes me conclude that the above is the real master plan and that Russia is hell-bent on implementing it. Also, the failed coup attempt by Prigozhin is not going to change anything. Wagner will be crushed and pose no more threat for Russia because he failed Prigozhin and he had that one chance, but he didn't take it. So it's not going to change anything. Russia will still be going after this master plan and being hell-bent on implementing it. Is it any good, that master plan? The short answer is no, because it will lead to the same problems that caused the Soviet Union to collapse and dissolve in the end of 1991. And what was that reason that the Soviet Union collapsed? Well, the Soviet Union collapsed because it spent all of the resources sustaining an enormous military machine that simply sucked the life out of everything else. So the society became ever more impoverished and antiquated compared to the rest of the world. Okay, but let's consider the first argument why history is going to repeat, but now for Russia, and then Russia is going to collapse just like the Soviet Union collapsed originally, and for pretty much the same reasons. So the first argument is that for Russia to 5x its military production and 5x its army, it will require Russia to reallocate about 8 million young people from industry creating economic wealth, real products that people can enjoy, to non-productive industry like military production that nobody can enjoy, but the army needs it. And then also creating a big army that will take another 4 million, so that's 8 million. That is going to suck out the energy of the Russian society. But there's another argument here. That's number 2 here. Russia's life expectancy is now started to fall again in 2020. And you can see that in this figure here, where actually Russia's life expectancy was first falling a lot. But then Putin did something good. If I have to say something good about this man, it is that when he came to power, he cracked down on Russian drinking, and he also built out the hospital sector in Russia. So there was better hospitals, and it actually resulted in Russians starting to live longer lives. And he also opened up the society, Putin, to the world from this Soviet Union, so that it became more integrated with the world and actually experienced quite a lot of wealth and economic growth. Had he just continued with that, everything would be fine, but no, he had to go to war. But that all stopped here in 2020 when life expectancy at birth in Russia has started to fall again. And I guarantee you, if we have more data available, you will see a continued dropping living age here in Russia. So the third reason here is that Russia's fertility rate or birth rate per woman is unsustainably low at 1.8, below the needed 2.1 child that a woman has to give birth to on average in order for a population just to stay flat in terms of growth of population. If it's below that, it will drop over time. If it's higher than that, it will increase over time. And here we can see the fertility rate in Russia in this figure. And it actually was positive, but then it had fallen, and now it's not sustainable. And it hasn't been for quite a while, and that's why Russia's population is doomed to be smaller and smaller over time. But one thing is that Russian net migration, we have a graph showing Russian net migration was actually positive, meaning that people were moving to Russia from other countries. But now it has dropped from being quite positive, so Russia got new people from migration, but it has dropped now. The official number says that now net migration is 0.6 people per 1,000 people in Russia for 2023. And that's a lie. It's not true. And we know that because the data down here that I have from another source, not the Russian state official statistics, but from other countries that have listed how many Russians came to their country in 2022 alone. And Georgia here has received 112,000 Russians, Kazakhstan 100,000, Serbia 100,000, Turkey 80,000, etc., etc. It all sums up to over 500,000 Russians that have left Russia in 2022 alone to avoid being sent to the Ukrainian war, because the fact is that every young man now in Russia are at risk of being mobilized for war and face almost certain death or serious disability for the rest of their life if they do not escape from Russia. And the point I'm trying to bring home here is that Russia is going to need people to win this war or it will fail. And they have the birth rate working against them, and they also have net migration that's certainly negative now working against them. But let's continue. Let's go into some of the really good arguments I have here. Fifth reason that Russia's master plan is doomed is that Russia's kill rates are 2.9 in favor of Ukraine, despite Ukraine currently having fewer weapons and lesser quality weapons than Russia. So what does it mean when the kill rate is 2.9 in Ukraine's favor? It means that Ukraine can destroy or capture 2.9 times more equipment than Russia destroy or capture of Ukraine's equipment. And I have made a video about it where I went deep into kill rates. But here you can see this table, that's the big upshot from that video, and there's total equipment losses here of 10,600 pieces of equipment that can be tanks and total armored vehicles and artillery and aircraft, helicopters, etc. And 10,660 pieces of that equipment Ukraine has managed to destroy or capture, and Russia has only managed to destroy or capture 3,645 pieces of Ukraine equipment. So when you divide this number with this number, then you get 2.9. That's a kill rate. That's quite remarkable, as I said, because Ukraine has achieved that with less weapons and with less quality weapons. But they have much better soldiers and they're much more motivated for this war than Russia is. Russia is trying to conquer another country. Ukraine is fighting for their freedom and independence and their democracy. That's something worth dying for, in my opinion it is. And that's why they're better at killing the Russians, despite all odds. Another key observation is that Russia has irreversibly lost 436,000 people since the war started. Either they have been killed, you can see here 218,000 have been killed, and then a lot of wounded, that's 3 times as many, and half of those that are wounded, they are just permanently wounded and can no longer be used for war, and likely also not be used for economic activity elsewhere in the Russian society. So they have become effectively a burden for the Russian society. Again, the point I'm trying to bring home here is that Russia is going to bleed out and they're going to collapse like the Soviet Union, because they don't have any resources for productive things. And the thing here is NATO has recently begun to supply Ukraine with more and higher quality weapons. So now the kill rate for Ukraine will start going further up. Maybe Ukraine can kill 10 times more equipment and people than Russia can kill of Ukraine because of these new weapons that are coming in. I'd especially say that if Ukraine get a lot of long-range heavy-duty missiles and also a lot of airplanes, NATO has thousands of airplanes that are much better than what Russia has. And if we just give Ukraine those airplanes and a lot of laser-guided bombs with them, then Ukraine can really start hammering the Russian troops and kill them by large numbers. And then this kill rate will go up. And of course we are going to do it. Russia is planning to spend about 5 years on this. And 5 years is plenty of time to train hundreds of Ukrainian pilots to operate hundreds of great airplanes from NATO. And I want to conclude here from all of the above, the Russian master plan will actually require 12.5 million people to be removed from the productive part of the Russian economy. And how do I calculate that? Well, I have this little table down here. Assuming the master plan is 5 times military production and 5 times the army, Well, military production will require 4 million men and extra army mobilization another 4 million men. Then we have losses 5 years, assuming a very modest 500,000 dead or permanently incapacitated Russians every year for 5 years. That's 2.5 million lost there. Then we have net migration over 5 years, also assuming 400,000 per year. That would be 2 more million. You sum that up, that will be 12.5 million that will lack now in the Russian economy for productive uses. That's 17% of the entire number of people who are employed at any occupation, including military, in Russia. They have 73 million people employed. That's a lot, and it will suck the life out of the Russian economy. And I guarantee you, if they could get this plan executed on, they can't. The war will end before that will be implemented. All that Russians will be able to afford to eat would be cabbage and carrots and potatoes, and then they'll drink water. And they won't be able to buy cars or appliances or anything. There won't be money for that. Everything will go to the military, and the society will start to rot from within. It'll just be more and more obsolete. So that's what is coming for the Russians, and that's why they should stop this war and withdraw from Ukraine completely before it gets any worse. But okay, let's continue. Last slide. Another reason here Russia's master plan is doomed is that Russia's export of oil, gas, and weapons, their three main articles of export, has catastrophically diminished since the start of the war in February 2022. Russian gas export to the European Union, that's pretty much all of the piped gas that are exported from Russia. It dropped from 3,000 million cubic meters per week to less than 500 million cubic meters per week. And you can see it in this graph here. And the other thing is that Western countries no longer buy Russian oil, so that Russia has to sell this oil now to China or India at a huge discount of about 10 to 20 US dollar per barrel. Also, Russia, before they sold the oil to Europe, and they had almost no cost of transporting the oil because they pumped it into Europe in pipelines. Now they have to charter tankers and sail it half around the world to supply China and India with the Russian oil, and they have to pay that cost. And the final thing here is Russian weapons has been proven to be inferior here in this Ukraine war, and so demand will go down. But also, and that's perhaps even more important, Russia needs their own weapons so they can't export them. I made a little table down here where I actually looked up these numbers and estimated how much they are. And arms export in 2022 was only $11 billion. Before I looked this up, I thought it was much higher, but it's actually not high at all. Here we have another graph of arms export from Russia. Back in 2018, it was $19 billion. That was when it was at the highest, and then it has simply dropped to $11 billion here in the latest available data. Oil export is a big thing Russia has. In 2021, it was 180 billion US dollars, and now the estimate is that this year it will be 164 billion dollars. That's an estimate I did. I'm an economist. I also have a PhD, and I can do estimates with some precision, I'd say. I have said here that the oil price on average in 2023 will be 55 US dollars. Let me bring this in. This is an Excel spreadsheet where you have all the data I have made available in this presentation. You can download this Excel spreadsheet. Here I have this table with Russian export and GDP, and I have links here to all the data I have here. And then I have, for this estimate I have made myself, I have explained exactly what I have done and with references to the data I have it from in order to substantiate it. But I'll get that away. It's only if you are interested in validating my own reasoning here that you can download that and test it for yourself. Anyway, my estimate is that Russian oil revenue from export will drop to 165 billion US dollars, so it will go down. The biggest drop will come from gas export because, as I said, the major part of Russian gas export was to Europe and it has totally collapsed. But they still have some LNG, liquefied natural gas, that they can export, but that's only 7.5 billion US dollar. I've assumed that's the same for 2023. But the other piped gas export simply collapses, and that's why they end up only exporting 16 billion US dollar of gas this year, down from 62 billion dollars in 2021. And also other Russian export, I've said Russian export will drop from 238 billion dollars, and that's everything that's not weapons, oil and gas, to 180 billion. Why do I think it will drop? Well, because of this reason here, economic sanctions. Russia is already facing economic sanctions that over time here will cripple the Russian economy. But it has already made it very difficult for Russia to make some of the stuff that they were exporting because they need parts that are no longer there available for import, all kind of things. So I think Russian export all in all will drop from 490 billion US dollar in 2021. That's data I have confirmed from elsewhere. And then my estimate is it will drop here this year to $365 billion. So a big drop, $120 billion down. And that's quite a lot for an economy that only was $1,800 billion in 2021. It will go down by a lot. And I'm sure that the Russian Statistical Bureau will put out some data about the Russian economy only dropped a little bit, but that will be bullshit and political nonsense. Russia's economy is tanking, and it's tanking hard, and it will tank even more in the coming years, especially when they start to mobilize more and more people for arms production and for that army, and also all the people who would be killed in Ukraine. So the big takeaway from this presentation that is now going at the end is that Russia has a master plan. I think it's now clear what it is. They want to reestablish the Soviet Union, and they're going to fail miserably for the reasons I've stated here. And also because Ukraine has friends, Russia don't have friends. The friends Ukraine has is my country, Denmark. It's United States. It's all countries in Europe. It's Japan. It's a lot of countries whose economies are like 60, 70 times bigger than Russia's economy. So whatever Russia can come up with for making their great army, we can trump it. We can just send more and better weapons to Ukraine, and we don't even have to spend a lot of resources because we have an economy that's like 70 times larger than Russia's. How can they win this? They can't. It's a nonsense nightmare that Putin and Putin's inner circle has created for their country, and they will go over in history as losers, as the biggest idiots who ever ran the Russian state, even worse than the former rulers of the Russian country there and also the Soviet Union. They're just hopeless, and I hope they'll stop it. I want to show you the last thing here. I have some sources and attribution. You can download links to everything I've said, all the claims I made. I have links here, and you can download my entire presentation down there by following my links. I have a vlog website that I set up that has all this information. I only have one thing to say. Please subscribe to my channel. Please have it grow. When I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll get the full package from YouTube. And then I can do much more interesting things. I can do live streaming. Well, a lot of things will be available to me if I just have 1,000 subscribers. So please subscribe and perhaps also click like or something for my video to make it more available on the YouTube algorithm. So thank you for watching my video. I wish you a healthy and good life in freedom and democracy. Goodbye.